Welcome to the Ogles channel, thanks for watching today, and let's continue journeying through all the games on the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color. Now last time we did Kirby's Dream Land, which I've never played before, and we're journeying to another game I've never played before called James Bond 007. Now, growing up, I always knew about this game because it came out pretty soon after Goldeneye, and I loved Goldeneye. I remember reading the reviews for this and seeing screenshots and Nintendo Power, and I really wanted to try it, but I just never got around to it. So what better time than now to dive into James Bond 007. Now, I always like to start these reviews off by looking at the box art first, and this is pretty much the quintessential James Bond box art because it has, of course, has the little James Bond logo and has James Bond himself shooting at you as you're looking at him through a scope here, and the blood is coming down. And this is how they start pretty much all the games and all the movies. And there's really no better imagery for James Bond than this particular picture. Now when you start to go up, you get a very straight to the point title screen here of James Bond standing there doing a very James Bondish pose with the James Bond theme music playing in the background. And it's honestly a pretty good rendition of the James Bond theme. And it's going to repeat several times throughout the game. Pretty much anytime something important happens or you push a switch or any important missions accomplished, you get the James Bond theme. Sometimes a little bit of a rendition of it, but you're going to hear this song multiple times throughout the game. Now our story here begins in China, and we're basically searching for this lady named Jo May and trying to find her palace to figure out what does she know about the arms race or the weapon trade that's been going on around the world. Because according to the overarching story here, there's somebody trying to gain all of these weapons to create basically a nuclear apocalypse, become the most powerful ruler in the world. And we're going to see a lot of James Bond core villains and characters appear throughout the game. But we are searching at the beginning anyway for Jo May, and at the first of the level here, we basically get our basic attacks like a block move and a punch move, and it's going to feel a lot like Zelda when it comes to that, and it's going to feel more like Zelda as we go, because it eventually gets to the point where we actually have like a shield and a machete, so we have like a sword and a shield, and it really feels like we're going through Hyrule, chopping down bushes. But at the beginning here anyway, we got a block and we got a punch. So we start going to some of the local houses here, and we go into the first one here, search around for some different weapons or different items. We go up to the bed. If you click the bed, you actually get a little med kit. That's our first item for the game, and you're going to use these a lot throughout the game because you get damaged quite a bit. But of course, you journey on, you go down the harbor here, and you see the harbor's been broken apart. There's a fella there that says if he had a hammer, he could fix the harbor. So now our mission is to find this hammer. We go into the next little local house around us, and we think to ourselves, where should we search? And we think, well, the med kit was in the bed. Let's check the bed. And sure enough, the hammer is also located in the bed. The game has conditioned us to always check the beds, which is sort of deceitful because these are like the only two items hidden in beds throughout almost the entire game. And so they conditioned us to do something and they just totally dropped it off. But regardless, we got our hammer, we take it back to him, he fixes that bridge up lickety-split, and off we go, heading trying to find Jo May's house. Now evidently Jo May is like the most beautiful person in the world because like every single villager you meet talks about how beautiful Jo May is. But you get to be your own judge in a little bit of how she's depicted in the game. But as you journey on, you eventually get to have your first fight in the game, and the fighting system is very much of a time-based system, as in like you put your block up, you wait for them to attack, and that gives you an opening at that point to then attack them. And almost all the fights are the same throughout the entire game as far as like block, attack, block, attack. And there are some that it is beneficial just simply just going in and just straight attack, attack, attack. But for so many of the battles, they're going to feature pretty much this exact same mechanic, which is just wait it out, block, and then you get your few attacks in and continue on. But it's not a bad system, but it is a fairly unique system when I'm used to more of a Zelda game where it's like dodge and attack and dodge and attack. You actually utilize the block a great deal. Now when you head on into the palace, someone tells you there's a secret in the palace, and you look around and nothing looks like a secret, but there's only so many walls and there's so many rooms here. So I just start going around to basically all the walls, pressing the A button, and finally, eventually, one of the walls shows a secret, and you get to go through the secret wall. Sort of random, but hey, it worked out. Then you follow a little pathway through here, and you find a safe, and it says you need a key. But where's the key? So then I do my same strategy. I just simply go around to all the filing cabinets here, pressing A, and eventually one of them gives me a key, and I'm able to open up the safe. And it sort of sets the tone for this game. It's like there's a lot of stuff that's hidden throughout, and it's going to be sort of a trial and error of just sort of searching through these rooms, pressing A, trying to find every secret or every item that you can. Now, when you open the door up, you're ready for your first boss fight in the game, which is going to be Jo May. And the first time I went in there, I tried my block strategy, which the henchman taught me so well to use, and I got demolished. It did not work at all. And so the second time I went in there for the fight, I did try that more offensive strategy and just sort of went straight into the battle, just going right at it, and it worked out a heck of a lot better. I'm not going to say like I dominated the fight, but it worked out a lot better. And after this, of course, you fight a few more henchmen, and then you finally get on a little boat, and you sail out of there, and you're heading toward M back in London to break down the mission here and figure out where to go next on your little discovery of the arms race. Now, when you get to the home base, it's naturally being a James Bond game. Him and the secretary have to flirt back and forth a little bit, and then M, of course, gives him a mission as far as where to go next. And also, you find Q, and Q actually gives you two vital items here. You're gonna get your first pistol in the game, and you also get like a little lightning keychain. And I was really excited about the lightning keychain because I was like, man, I can just throw it on the ground and shock all these enemies. And that's not at all how it works. You don't get to use it at all until you get to a boss fight, and the game automatically throws it on the ground for you. I was a little disappointed about that, but at least we got our pistol here, and we are ready to continue on our mission. And now we're going to be heading to Kurdistan to try to find Iqbal and 008, and try to find out more about the hidden weapons or the arms race that's going on. And before we go too far, inside of Q's little room here, you know, he's always working on different inventions for Bond to have. There's actually one that's really awesome that should have appeared more in the game, and it's the little glitched out couch here that just sort of like eats people. And I have no idea why they decided to put this in the game, but I love the idea that they actually put a couch in here that basically glitched out to eat people. It reminds me of that Lonely Island song, where it says like something like couches.
Killing machine!
Now in Kurdistan, the scenery is going to be totally different than the last level. It's very focused on the Middle East as far as like, you know, a desert aesthetic. You have little goats grazing on the grass, the cows bathing in the river. Even the architecture is pretty accurate for what the Middle East is as far as like Game Boy graphics can go on that. And you even have Aladdin's lamp you're going to rescue at some point, which is going to focus more like an actual lamp. It's not going to be like a genie. There's no supernatural in this game, but you are going to utilize that as you go as well. But the Kurdistan level is also where we get a core aspect or core gameplay aspect of this game, which is going to be very much of like the trading game inside of Zelda, where you find one item and take it to someone else, and they give you another item, take that to someone else, and it eventually leads you to a really good item inside the game. Now in the Zelda games, that's sort of like an optional thing, and this game it is required for the plot here. And so like in this level, you have to like find a ring and take the ring to a prisoner, but then the prisoner also needs paper, so then you go find paper from someone writing a letter, bring that to the prisoner, he turns that into a little key card, use that key card to get into a cabaret, and when you're in the cabaret, then you can get Aladdin's lamp, and then when you get Aladdin's lamp, then you can finally get the machete, and it's just like a constant little trade circle here. You have to really listen to the dialogue to know where you're supposed to go inside this game. If you don't follow the dialogue, you're not going to know what to do for this game. But even if you do read all the dialogue, there's some areas of the game that are just really convoluted on like not knowing what to do or where to go. And there's like this one part here when you're in the cabaret, there's a little guarding the door, and I couldn't get by him for the life of me. And I wandered around trying to find a key and all sorts of stuff. And it turned out you had to take your pistol and shoot the light behind the bartender here. And when the light was knocked out, then you could escape through the back exit to get the lamp. It took me forever to figure that out. Like, why would you just simply randomly shoot the light? And it just sort of dawned on me after a while. But it is a really difficult thing to figure out. But regardless, when you finally get the lamp, you get to head into the cave here. It's all lit up. You can find Iqbal, and it's a pretty good little fight against Iqbal. You actually get to throw out that little electrical keychain I was talking about earlier, and you have to sort of trap him into going into that, and it shocks him, and at that point you can shoot him, or you can attack him with your punch, or your machete rather, and it's a good little fight, but it's a little disappointing Electric Keychain didn't have more of a part, but after you fight him, and of course then you get to talk to 008, and 008 tells you that Oddjob's wrapped up in all of this arms race as well, and now you need to go find Oddjob. And then you head off to a place called Marrakech, which is in Morocco, to search for Oddjob. And this is the absolute hardest, most annoying level this game has to offer, and holy cow, it took me like at least an hour, maybe even closer to 2 hours to finish this level, because there is so much backtracking and there's such a lack of direction. It's like one giant maze on where to go. Now when you first come into the level, I'm wandering around talking to people, and I get a little satellite link, and I eventually work my way down to the marketplace, because it keeps telling you, go to the marketplace, go to the marketplace. I go through the marketplace, I work my way into this little cave here, I get to the end of the cave, and there's these little sealed doors, and I have no idea how to get through the sealed doors. I'm like, well, what is this all about? So I start backtracking. Finally, I find out that there was a whole extra area toward the very beginning of the level that I wasn't even instructed to go to. I go over that direction. I finally go through a casino over there. I get to play a little game of blackjack, which is actually pretty creative. They actually worked a full blackjack game into this game. And of course, you play a little game of blackjack, earn enough money, get like a backstage pass at the casino, go back there, meet up with a guy named Fez. Of course, can't really do a lot with Fez at this point, but that leads you eventually to finding Q's room, and eventually you get the little laser watch, and then finally you can go back to these doors, and you can actually go through these sealed doors. Now that sounds like it wasn't that much, but by the time you backtrack through all of this, that's like a solid hour of your time just wandering around, not knowing where to go. The game really needs a map system for these levels in particular. The earlier levels, they could probably get by without a map, but this level was so huge, it needed a map, especially when it came to like finding shortcuts and all these little buildings with multiple exits. And also just simply to keep up with your trading game a little bit. It was so ridiculous I even wrote it all down here. You have to get a chicken to give to the cat man, a cat to give to the rat man, to get a pearl from him, give the pearl to get a passport, and give the passport to get the night goggles to head to the north to the catacombs. And that begs the question, why didn't you just keep the lamp from the last level to get through the catacombs? Why did you need to go through all of this process here? The only benefit of this entire trading thing was you got to have a cat at one point. And the idea of James Bond walking around this little town, this little marketplace with a cat under his arm, that's a golden James Bond moment for me. But it's also going through this game, I've discovered something that's like completely unique to every Game Boy game, and that's that they have characters that are actually smoking inside this game. This may be the only Game Boy game, or even like old retro game I've ever played, where there's like actual characters who are just out there smoking a cigarette. And I mean, it's a very much of a sign of the times, because most games wouldn't even want to include smoking now, because that like moves them up on the ESRB immediately just by having a cigarette in the game. And so it's a little bit of a unique thing here. But as you travel through the level here, you do meet some other characters like Miss Bliss, who gives you a diamond, and you can trade that diamond to get a tranquilizer gun, use that tranquilizer to then shoot Fez, and then you go back to Fez and you get his keys, and you go back to his hotel room, and when you go back to his hotel room with that key, you meet Oddjob, and Oddjob's going to basically attack you here. He's going to bombard you with his little hat so much that there's no way to win the battle. I was a little discouraged at first until I realized like it's part of the game to lose that battle. And he captures you and he dumps you off in the Saharan desert pretty much to kill you off. And I have to say, this level here was just so large, it could have almost been like its own game. There's so much trading going on in this game. There's so many different characters to meet inside of this level. There's its own blackjack game in this game. There's different caves. There's different hidden rooms. There's a marketplace. There's a cityscape. I mean, there's so much in this particular level. The idea that there's not a map is just still mind-blowing. But this level is enormous, and I can't say I liked the level because I got so confused going through it. But regardless, we're done with it now. Let's head on to the next part, which is the Saharan Desert. Now, evidently, Oddjob wasn't too good at his little mission here because he dropped me off in the Saharan Desert with no water. But if you just simply go up one screen, you get a canteen from this fella on the camel, and you go straight back down to the well. You fill it up, and now you can go up to 6 screens away from that before you start losing life. And your goal is basically find the exit to this level within those 6 screens. And it's actually pretty challenging because you go out one direction 6 screens and you end up running out of water and you die. You try another direction, you end up running out of water and you die. You go another direction, you get killed by this little scorpion here. It's like you're playing the original Pitfall. But it took me a while to finally find the exit out of the desert because it really is just sort of trial and error until you finally find your way out. I ended up going like northwest. I don't know exactly the direction I went as far as like screen wise, but it was northwest, and you find your way into this little base over here. And it's at this base, Bond's able to get on an airplane and head off to his next mission, which is to try to find Oddjob again. And evidently Oddjob is now hiding out in the mountains of Tibet. So off we go to Tibet. And Tibet is a really cool looking level because this is a snow scene inside the Himalaya mountains. And my gosh, this is such a cool looking snow level. And one of my favorite things about this level is as you're traveling through it, you actually get to see what you think is going to be a Yeti. And I was like, holy cow, they worked a Yeti into the Bond game. We're going to get to fight against the Yeti here. And as you go up to it and you talk to him, it turns out to just be another agent sort of in disguise here, working undercover as a Yeti, which is a odd way to go about it, but still, I was pretty excited to see a Yeti inside the game. But as you're journeying throughout the caves in Tibet here, you're going to notice that the difficulty of the game has gone up a pretty significant notch. I'm not talking about like the trading game here or like the lack of map. I'm talking about like the enemy difficulty. Because up until this point, the blocking and the attacking was pretty straightforward. But in this one, you have to like really focus your blocks. And I found out like the machete, for me at least, worked just as good as the pistol, if not better in a lot of cases. So I ended up using the machete for a lot of it. But you're going to get bombarded a lot throughout these caves. And in some areas, I actually found it better just simply to run through the crowds and try to make it out the other side without really engaging any of them, because I ended up losing more health if I engaged them than if I just simply took the few hits on my way running through the cave. But as you're going through the cave, your main goal is simply to find a metal hook and a rope, and then find the metal shot that can combine those two together to make you a hook shot, and use that hook shot to travel higher up on the mountain to get into Oddjob's hidden or secret base here. And once you get in there, Oddjob is going to make you go through what's called a test of courage before you can get to him. And the test of courage is basically Bond taking on like 20 sumo wrestlers. Now, you don't take them all on at once. It's usually like 2 at a time at first, and then 3 at a time, and then 4 at a time. And you have to go through all these different stages of fighting these sumo wrestlers. And what an odd thing to have in the James Bond game of just simply fighting multiple sumo wrestlers. I never expected to see that, and initially it was actually sort of hard to get the timing right, but if you just wait, as soon as they attack, block it, and then immediately attack them back. There's almost no delay in there, and by doing that you can actually defeat the sumo wrestlers pretty quickly, but it's just weird to have so many sumo wrestlers at one point in the game. But when you do defeat all the sumo wrestlers, you go out, you think you finally got Oddjob, but when you walk out, Oddjob's out there and he's got all of his men pointing their guns at you, and Bond is officially captured. And at this point, Oddjob takes you to his other secret base, and he's basically torturing Bond at the base. And what I mean by torturing, he basically has him in a jail cell here that Bond can open on his own. So torture might be a strong word. But as soon as Bond exits out the torture cell here, he's going to meet up with Jo May again. And Jo May, she's now swapped sides, and now she's on Bond's side. And she was only doing the things she was doing earlier to try to help her family and such as that. And so now she's actually working with Bond in order to escape from Oddjob's secret base. And as an overarching, she's trying to stop the nuclear apocalypse that's oncoming as well. Now, as you journey throughout this level, you're going to find new weapons and such to use. Like you finally get a shield to use. And the shield is really effective at finally blocking bullets, which we could have used a lot throughout the game up to this point. But now we can block bullets, and so we're basically back to our old strategy of block, and then as soon as they stop shooting, you can then shoot and then block, and just simply go through that same pattern all over again. Now, as you journey through the level, you do get a little bit lost, and the enemies are a little bit tougher. With the shield, it helps out a lot, and you finally get to Oddjob himself, and what a fun boss fight here. Oddjob is once again throwing out his hats, but you can use the shield to reflect the hats back up to Oddjob. And it takes a lot of hats in order to take Oddjob out. And my recommendation here is just simply stand in the far upper right corner, put your shield up, and Oddjob can't hit you up there, and it reflects all the hats. And when he comes over into the corner where you're at, shoots them all straight back at him, and you can have him be probably first try doing this strategy, as long as you can make your way up to the corner. If you want to do it the other way, it is more, I guess, challenging and more like the game intended, but you will probably die a few times trying to get it right. But it's just neat to see how much variety there is amongst all these boss fights. Now, once you defeat Oddjob, he basically says, hey, it's not me you want, it's actually somebody else I'm working for. It's Golgov, you gotta go find him if you want to stop this whole plot from taking place. So you go back to Jo May, you rescue Jo May, and then off you go trying to find Golgov. Now, in order to find Golgov, you actually have to go back to Kurdistan where you were earlier in the game, and when you get there, you realize like your actions from earlier have consequences. And so when you destroyed their leader, you sort of threw Kurdistan into chaos where two other leaders overtook it and turned a civil war into this area. And pretty much everyone blames you for what happened. As you're traveling throughout the landscape, it's actually pretty horrifying. Like the buildings are on fire. There's people who are dead in the streets or dying in the streets with vultures pecking at them. It's a really sad, depressing scene of what you've done. Some of the ladies in the town actually say they want to spit in your face because of the chaos that's ensued from your actions. It reminds me a little bit like the Watchmen storyline or Civil War. In the Marvel universe as well, where the heroes try to do something good and then it ends up backfiring on them, and a lot of destruction happens because of it. And it's just weird that they included such a dark side plot inside this game. But while you're here, your main goal is to find Saddam and Qatar, the two leaders who have overtaken the area, causing this destruction, causing this war zone to take place, take them out, and then find Mustafa, who's going to give you information exactly where Golgov's going to be. So you go out and you find Qatar, and Qatar is actually a super easy enemy. I'm not sure if he was supposed to be harder, but I sort of got him stuck on the edges of the little boxes here, and by doing that, it was a heck of a lot easier. And when you find Saddam, Saddam has some super powerful weapons, but if you can just get off to the side and take one slice at him, Saddam's taken out as well. So that was actually a super easy boss fight for both of them. And then you have to find your way all the way through the war zone again. And the war zone's like a little bit of a maze here because it's got all these different paths you can go on. And bombs are, of course, encouraging you to go faster so you don't get hit. But you finally find your way down into the cave, and Mustafa's down there, and he didn't tell you that you need to go to Russia. I mean, this is really just a game of run around. The whole game here is just telling you go here, go here, go here. But ultimately, we do end up in Russia, where Golgov's base is at, and Golgov's the one we're going to be trying to stop from basically bringing on this nuclear apocalypse. Now, when we get to Russia, we're going to get to fight against another core villain of the Bond series, which is going to be Jaws, but he's hidden behind this massive maze of tanks and buildings here. And when I say maze, it's like a legitimate maze. The only hint you have is from your little helper who got you to Russia, and he says it's to the northeast. And I have no idea if it's actually to the northeast because I ended up going like northwest, and finally it circled me away around to the northeast. But it took an eternity to go through this, and the enemies are so hard. There's so many game overs you're going to have in this particular level just because there are so many enemies to fight through as you're trying to find your way into this base. I guess perhaps if you like knew the exact coordinates to go to, it might go a little bit quicker, but for me, like, it took forever to get through this. This game, in this level, and especially in the marketplace level, the game needs a map, and I think the game would be a lot better if it had those small improvements. But eventually you get to Jaws' little base here, Jaws' building. You go inside and you get to have a boss fight against Jaws, and once again they mixed up the type of boss fight here. Instead of just a straightforward punch or shoot like some of the other smaller bosses. Jaws is a main boss here. You have to step on a magnet, lead him up to the magnet, it attaches to his head, and that's when you can fight and attack Jaws. I don't know if like in the movies, I don't know the lore behind Jaws. I don't know if he has like a metal head or something, but it basically the magnet pulls him up there, makes him get stuck, and you take your shots at him, and then basically follows this little pattern I'm doing on the screen here, and it always activates the magnet, take him straight up to it, gets him stuck, shoot him once, and pretty much a guaranteed victory by doing that. But it's a really cool boss fight, and I really do like how they mixed up the style of boss fights throughout the game, so it's just simply not the same boss over and over and over. And then you get to enter into Golgoth's base here, and Golgoth's base is actually a really simple level. They try to make it complex by having all these little switches to hit on and off, but the switches are super easy to find. There's not a lot of enemies in between the switches, and it just opens these doors up, and you basically travel through all of them until you finally get to Golgoth's little headquarters here. There's a little hideout room, and Golgoth looks like a mech warrior of sorts, or a Exo Squad fella. He's in this giant robot here, and you just sort of have to bait him out here. You just sort of run back left and right until he comes down and goes back up to the top, take your one shot, but you just sort of have to time it. Wait till he's coming across and shoot your shot a little bit ahead of time, and he'll run into your bullet as he's heading up there. I don't think you need anything more stronger than like a pistol. I mean, if you want to go a little bit faster, use one of the higher powered weapons, but even with a pistol, like he's a pretty easy boss. And halfway through the boss fight, the bottom half of him breaks off and he's sort of floating there. Same type of boss fight though, it doesn't change a lot, and just keep doing the same strategy and you'll have him defeated probably first try because he's just not a real difficult boss. Honestly, Oddjob was the hardest boss in this game, and most of these other bosses, if you just sort of play them a time or two, you'll figure out the best strategy pretty easily. And after you defeat Golgoth, it's just like any of the other villains in these type of movies or these type of games. They've already set into motion the nuclear apocalypse, and now they're destroyed. You have to hit all these switches in order to stop the final nuclear blast from taking off or the nuclear rocket from launching. And so now Bond's heading through all these little laser corridors, using his shield. One shield blocks bullets, one of his other shield blocks lasers. Work your way through all these corridors. Most of them aren't too bad, except for this one here where you're trying to basically time it just right to get down through these lasers. And honestly, it's just hard to stand in that particular direction facing the lasers. And I think the game knew that, but this is definitely the most hard part of all the laser journey. And then you get down to the final part here, you just got to flip 4 little switches to stop the final rocket from taking place. And then of course you and Joe May are going to flee the base together, and you've pretty much saved the day from an entire nuclear apocalypse, an entire nuclear meltdown, and Bond is once again the hero. And we finally have our first cutscene throughout the entire game. And I find it sort of weird that it didn't work more of these cutscenes throughout the game, because it really wouldn't have been that hard, and it would have made the between levels that much more entertaining just to see like one little cutscene or one little image or one little sprite walking along somewhere. It would have just really made the game that much more interesting to me. But regardless, we get this nice little cutscene of Bond and Joe May walking down the beach together, discussing their victory and how they're going to celebrate it. And they decide to celebrate it by taking a nice little boat ride off into the sunset, and thus ends the storyline for the James Bond 007. But overall, I felt it was a pretty good storyline for a Bond game. Yeah, I mean, it was sort of convoluted at some spots, but you got like a greatest hits of the Bond villains with Oddjob and Jaws, and you got 008 in there as well. M was in there, Q was in there, all the main players of a Bond game were in there. You actually got to see the results of some of Bond's actions as far as like what happened to Kurdistan after he went through it. That was interesting. I mean, there was a lot of interesting elements to the plot line. The gameplay itself, it was very reminiscent of like a Zelda game, but more based upon like blocking mechanics, and it was a lot harder than almost all the Zelda games as well. It wasn't like unforgiving because like if you accomplished a mission and then you died and you continued, that part of the mission was still accomplished and you just had to find the next part of the mission. And that was nice not to like have to reset the whole level after you died. But some of the levels took many tries for me to actually finally beat the level. A map would have also been really handy in at least half of this game. And the other half, it could have been fine without it, but the other part of the game, it definitely needed a map in order to just know where to go or where you've been. That would have been a huge plus for the game. And also the trading system probably could have been toned down just a little bit and replaced with maybe a little bit different action or something like that. The trading system got a little tiresome by the end of the game where you're just searching for random people throughout the village to take their cat or their rat or their pearl or their paper or their copper or whatever they needed to one location to another location. That got a little tiresome. Another plus of the game was, of course, the bosses. I really did enjoy the variety of bosses and how to actually fight the bosses. It wasn't just all the same. Walk in the room and punch, 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 or shoot, shoot, shoot. It was, get a magnet up here, or, find a corner, use your shield to block it. I mean, there's different aspects of the boss fights that made it really enjoyable. Overall, the game probably took me like 5 to 6 hours to complete, which was a lot longer than I had ever anticipated this game taking me. But if you're looking for a great overhead adventure game for the Game Boy, James Bond 007, it's a really fun game. Just be willing to look over the flaws a little bit and maybe get ready for some exploration on some of those extremely large levels. But overall, if you're looking for a fun Game Boy game, I don't think you can go wrong with James Bond 007. If you haven't given it a try, find it out there, give it a try sometime. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out other videos listed up above. As always, go out there, find a great game to play, and just simply have a great rest of the day.